What's the most NSFW thing you've seen in your school or college or university or life? I posted this a while back, but my high school had a set of bathrooms out by the football field. While you could go to the bleachers or something for lunch to hang out, not many people did since it was hot as hell with no shade. One day there was a long line from the men's bathroom, like 20 people in line outside the actual bathroom. Turns out there was a girl giving whistles in the back stall. Her and the kid that got caught in the act were expelled, I think. The girl allegedly had been kicked out of a few other high schools in the area for inappropriate acts. Looking back, it's actually pretty sad and probably a sign of neglect. I knew the kid caught and a few others in line. He was totally in line, wasn't he? Story 2. During my senior year of high school, I took an elective class in forensic science, taught by a retired police officer. It was genuinely one of the kindest and most authentic teachers I ever had, and he has since passed away. However, he might have been a little too candid with our class, as he didn't want to sugarcoat the realities of crime and incarceration. He often shared information and videos that, in hindsight, were not appropriate for high school students. I recall one video from a prison security camera showing an inmate being repeatedly harmed. I remember thinking to myself that there was no way a human body had that much red liquid in it. I wanted to emphasize the dangers of knives versus guns and made us watch it twice. I felt sick to my stomach and had a lot of trouble sleeping for days afterward. Somehow, I doubt the school administration was aware that this kind of content was being shared with students, as most of the kids in that class were the delinquent and didn't care types. And they absolutely loved that teacher. They would never report him. This teacher often had former students show up randomly during class to ask for help with legal troubles, and he would go to great lengths to assist them. He was just that kind of person. That being said, it was quite eye-opening for me. The fairly sheltered or AP or honor student who only took the class because I had an extra slot open my senior year. Honestly, I learned more about real life in that class than any other. Story 3. During high school health class, our very Christian teacher, who blushed throughout the entire unit, showed us a video of an actual birth. About 60 seconds after the baby emerged, leaving all the expected aftermath, the teacher exclaimed, "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Okay, that's certainly enough," and grabbed the remote to stop the videotape. Yes, this was a while ago. However, instead of pressing stop, she pressed rewind while the video was still playing. We then saw a newborn baby appear to go back in fast motion. Every student in our classroom screamed, and every female student reacted in shock and fear. Perhaps that's why many of us are still childless. Story 4. As a high school senior, I visited my university during rush week and went to a party at my dad's fraternity. There was a long glass wall separating the main room where a foam dance party was happening. From the outside courtyard, where there was beer and people socializing, inside the foam, visibility was very limited. At one point, while I was outside, I saw a person pressed against the glass. They were engaged in an intimate moment, seemingly thinking they were hidden by the foam, but they were quite visible to those outside. Or they just did not care. Story 5. In my high school drama class, we had one changing room for costume fittings. The male and female students would take turns using it. One day I went in to change as I was the only male student not yet in costume. All the girls in my class then proceeded to come in and start changing while I was still there, seemingly unconcerned by my presence. One of them even made eye contact with me while changing. All of them knew I was already in the room as they had watched me enter. A couple of them even complimented my garments, which felt like a nice compliment, clearly indicating I wasn't seen as a threat. Needless to say, I learned a lot about my classmates that day. Story 7. I didn't witness this, but the entire school heard about it. The grade level above ours, high school, went on a field trip aboard charter buses. For some reason, a group of guys in that class decided to have a contest to see who could finish fastest while in the bus's restroom. Allegedly, a few of the female students assisted them. The chaperoning teachers found out about it while it was happening. Apparently, one teacher started crying. It was quite a scandal, but that class was always involved in unusual situations. Story 8. One evening, while walking through an inner courtyard of a building, I passed a window with its shutters open and the light on. Inside the room, a couple was in an intimate moment. The woman caught my eye and seemed to intensify her movements, maintaining eye contact with me. It lasted a few seconds before I looked away and continued on my way. I left feeling a bit embarrassed and positively stunned. I'm pretty sure she was into it. Story 9. In high school and warm days right before the school year ended, we would have gym class on the football field. I was surrounded by a track with a fence around the entire thing, about chest high. I was the only person able to jump over it. My friend tried once and the back of his shorts got caught on it. They ripped halfway off, leaving him hanging upside down by the waistband. His entire name and address were visible not only to the whole gym class, but also to the huge windows of the classrooms that overlooked the field. Story 10. Very mild. I was at a track meet, and a high school girl tried to pull her sweatpants off in one sweeping motion, but unintentionally managed to grab everything and pull it down to her knees. I wish I could report that I said something witty or funny, but being a complete nerd, I went white as a sheet and pivoted 180 and walked off, pretending like I hadn't seen a thing. Story 11. In college, I attended a few parties where people became quite uninhibited. I vividly remember seeing a girl on the dance floor in a compromising position with someone. I also witnessed people using substances. These were quick ways to realize what wasn't compatible with as friends. Also, during college summers, I worked at a clubhouse with a pool and restaurant in a gated community. I looked out the bar window to see two people engaged in an intimate act in the pool, about 100 feet away from the outdoor restaurant patio where people were having dinner. Story 12. I went to Flagler College in St. Augustine, FL, which is located in a beautiful Gilded Age building. I happened to be dressed nicely, getting mentally prepared for a creative reading some of us were giving. I found myself needing to use the restroom, and the closest one was the beautifully restored original, full of marble, brass, and period fixtures. Anyway, I walked through the door, only to find, on the very ornate, very marble row of sinks, a couple engaged in an intimate act. The young man proceeded to panic and ran to hide in a corner of the bathroom, leaving the young lady on the counter, looking very much like a scene from an adult film. I knew the girl casually, so I waved and burst out laughing at the absurdity of the moment, then turned and left the bathroom. Story 13. I once worked as an evening overnight security guard at a university residence complex. It consisted of 3 towers, 31 floors in total, with over 1,000 residents. We had our own cafeteria, bar, corner store, pizza kitchen with room delivery, weight room, study spaces, library, and a games room or arcade, among other amenities. They also had a steam room and tanning beds. I observed many students, some partially dressed, using the tanning facilities. Additionally, I frequently had to check on students who attempted to be intimate in the steam room, only to become lightheaded or pass out. This happened probably once or twice a semester. As I was a current student living in the residence, I was the same age as everyone else. I didn't need to seek out entertainment elsewhere. My job provided plenty of interesting observations. Story 14. In university, my professor was sharing his PC screen for the lecture. At the start of the lesson, he was discussing exam dates and opened the Windows Start menu to look at the calendar. He was probably unaware that Windows 11 provides a slideshow photo stored in the PC. This resulted in a selfie of him in a compromising position appearing on the screen. I felt really bad for him because the screen was also being shared with students following the lesson remotely. I spent most of the lesson debating whether I should have told him about it. In the end, I didn't, and I believe he's still unaware of what he shared with almost 200 students. Story 15. While not as over the top as some of these stories, I have a personal favorite that spanned an entire semester. I took a civil law course in college, and I knew I was in for a good time when, on day 1, the professor introduced himself. I am Dr. So-and-so. Don't call me that. I hate that formality. My name's Frank. The entire class revolved around a fictitious lawsuit, and the final was a mock trial, where the class split into 2 teams. The case was made up entirely on the spot, so I spent an entire semester preparing to prove that just because a public figure was engaged in a compromising situation when he collided with another vehicle, it didn't mean he was at fault. When it finally came down to the trial, half my team spent the night passing a bottle of water that clearly contained vodka. Things dragged on longer than anyone expected. Eventually, Frank looked at the clock, stopped whoever was speaking, and said, "You know what? I've been here long enough. Forget it. Everyone gets an A. Now let's go to the bar." That was truly the best class ever. Story 16. During my senior year at a rural high school, we had an after-prom gathering at a hunting camp. About 40 of us attended. A junior and her boyfriend showed up and proceeded to drink excessively. She became very interested in our Argentinian exchange student and tried to initiate intimacy with him. She led him over a hill, and about 5 minutes later, the exchange student quickly walked back to the main group. He indicated that he wasn't comfortable with what she was suggesting. She then came back up the hill, visibly upset because no one wanted to be intimate with her. Her boyfriend then rushed up, and an intoxicated argument about their dissatisfaction ensued. They managed to separate him from her, and the girls helped her get dressed. She passed out soon afterward. May 1988. The boyfriend is now in prison, serving a life sentence for a tragic incident involving his father about 10 years ago. She is currently the chair of the Town Betterment Committee and organizes the July 4th Halloween and Christmas parades. We never speak of that night. Story 17. During lockdown times, while doing remote lessons, my professor was sharing a screen on Zoom as I was working on homework for an art class. I didn't have a webcam, or at least that's what I told them. While shading a detail, I looked up at the video and noticed that the tabs opened in his screen. They contained suggestive titles. My eyes widened and I quickly took a picture, sending it to a friend. My friend immediately told me to DM the professor to minimize the damage. As I was starting to panic, I quickly sent a message saying, "Hey, stop streaming your screen immediately. Check your tabs." Soon after, he handed the screen share for technical reasons. I sat there, muted, nervously laughing, still looking down at my half-finished art. I waited a few minutes before leaving the class midway through, as I was just too distracted to focus on our formulas after seeing that. The worst part is that the professor looked exactly how you'd imagine an older college professor who was caught doing something like that right before class would look. It really confirmed some stereotypes. Story 18. On a poorly lit highway known for speeding traffic, someone was towing a boat full of people. The boat came off the trailer. I drove up to the scene on my way home late at night just as police and other first responders were laying out white sheets everywhere, trying to block off the worst parts of the fire trucks. The boat and debris were spread down a mile or two of dark highway. I had to slowly navigate through it in my car with my headlights on and windows down because my AC was out, driving onto the grass to avoid the sheets and various fragments. I saw disturbing sights. Illuminated by tower lights, patrol car spotlights, and my own headlights, I witnessed things I was not prepared for at 17 years old. Fortunately, 25 years, along with alcohol and a few years of regular grass use, have mostly erased the worst parts. Every now and then, I still have an odd nightmare, though. Story 19. This story was just shared on Thursday. It's not mine, but I think it fits. I work at a university, and yesterday we had a big staff development day. It was admittedly a very good event. They went all out. We held it in our event center, and they even used a non-university catering service to ensure none of our food service staff had to work. We had 2 past presidents come to speak. One was just the second woman to be president of a university in our state. She told a story about the streakers on campus back in the 90s while she was president. She admitted it was pretty comical, but it was starting to get out of hand. It had been going on all week, and they managed to catch wind of one of the streaker's plans. He was going to his dorm in one corner of campus, run through the middle of the campus past the library, administration building, and old science building, and then a van would be waiting for him in the parking lot of the mathematics and language arts building. The administration didn't do anything to prevent his run, but they did have a plan. As he made it to the parked van, the back doors opened and he jumped in, still completely unchanged, of course, only to end up right in the lap of the dean of students. She said, and that took care of the streakers. Here's the sweet 85-year-old past president telling the story, giggling the whole time. We were all laughing hysterically. She's a hoot and sharp as a tack. Story 20. In many fraternity and sorority houses, instead of having a bed in every bedroom for each person, multiple people might share a room, keeping their belongings there, but everyone sleeps on the very top floor, often called a sleeping porch. My fraternity had 4 sleeping porches, one for each class from freshman to senior year. The freshman porch had 14 bunk beds, so we had 28 beds all in one open space. Fraternities on our campus allowed women to stay the night, but men couldn't stay at sororities. Naturally, a lot of intimate activities occurred in the sleeping porches. While most people put up bed sheets as a privacy barrier around their beds, many students simply engage in activities without any sheets up. Their philosophy was, if everyone else has sheets up, I basically do too. Anyway, I witnessed a lot of intimate moments happening when I was walking in or out of the sleeping porch. Story 21. I had a professor in college for an Asian films elective who had a knack for showing incredibly unsettling films. A lot of people stopped showing up after one particular film. The following quarter, it turned out she had also been dismissed from the college due to some public statements she made. This wasn't during class, but apparently it happened on campus. Another Asian studies or writing teacher actually played a significant role in her termination, and that's how most of us found out. It was a very strange situation. Initially, I lived in a student dorm with 3 other girls at a similar grade level. After 2 quarters, I moved into a 2-person apartment because one of my roommates had an extremely cruel boyfriend. Despite being on the football team, the university didn't take action against him, even after the police were called 4 times in a single quarter. Some of the issues caused by him included, he frequently gained unauthorized access to a room, even though he wasn't supposed to be in the building, a rule enforced only by the police, not the university, for some reason. He ruined our microwave with a metal soup can. I'm still not sure if it was on purpose, but when it exploded, he reacted by grabbing a towel, placing it over the metal, trying to put it back into the microwave, and then turning it back on a second time. We no longer had a microwave after that. He regularly allowed other individuals into our apartment. Sometimes I'd wake up in the morning, my room was locked, to find people I wasn't even sure were students, and therefore not allowed in the building, sleeping on my couch. It was cruel towards my roommate on multiple occasions, which was why the police were initially called. Sometimes he would take her close, leaving her unable to leave the dorm room. His behavior alternated between being a general nuisance and genuinely dangerous, almost as if he had multiple personalities. This ranged from being an annoyance by playing video games on our TV at an extremely high volume to serious incidents like breaking and entering and other concerning acts. There's a lot more I could say about that last part, which made me scared enough to leave the entire building. However, I don't believe the university ever ultimately disciplined him, seemingly prioritizing sports, like most universities do. If you're enjoying the video though, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 22. During my freshman year of high school, we had an aquatics elective where we swam and played games in the pool every morning. There was this beautiful blonde freshman girl who wore a different bikini every day. One day, we were playing King of the Raft, using an overturned rubber raft, where the person on top tries to keep others from getting on. She was the king, and was moving and kicking her legs energetically while laughing. Suddenly, every boy started playing because, unbeknownst to her, her bikini had shifted. It certainly made our day. As we got dressed after class, it was all the boys were talking about. Story 23. All these stories are from high school. Our biology and intimate ed classes were somewhat combined. Our teacher had us watch a video of a woman giving birth. It was raw footage, straight to the point. The twist? It was her giving birth. Before you ask, yes, the school had cleared it for her to show, but that certainly wasn't included in the permission slips. Intimate activities in bathrooms were common, of course. The choir room, however, was a particular hotspot. I participated in that one myself. Otherwise, you'd see other things at parties. I'm not a shy person and was comfortable participating in that kind of stuff. And there was more unusual behavior, like people inserting fireworks into various parts and setting them off. Really strange things. I grew up in a rural area, so most people started working at 14 or even younger. I started working when I was 8 years old. My friend was working at a local bar as a busboy. I went to hang out and saw a couple of teachers using substances on each other. We also had, sadly, several teachers who would get into relationships with students immediately after they graduated. That's alarming. They aren't employed there these days, but one guy in particular was known for it. He was also married with about 6 kids. Definitely weird and unsettling. It's pretty wild in retrospect. For reference, this would have been decades ago. Certainly not recent. Story 24. I worked at Chipotle in college, which was located in a block with many bars and restaurants popular with students on weekends. I was working a closing shift, and we closed at 11 p.m., so I was out pretty late. I decided to cut through an alleyway to get back to my dorm. As I walked, I saw a couple engaged in an intimate act, leaning over a car trunk. This was in the middle of winter in upstate New York, so it was probably around 20 degrees. I honestly give them credit for that. Anyway, I put my head down and kept walking. Story 25. Not college, but at a sports restaurant I worked at many years ago. We had satellite dishes for the games. Yes, that long ago. We also had our own version of a Norm Peterson character, who was the satellite guy and had run up quite a barbell. So in exchange for having a large chunk of his bill forgiven, they got him to enable all the good channels. One night, the general manager and his girlfriend stayed after everyone else had left. The next day at opening, the front of house manager's last task was to turn on the TVs in the place by just pressing the button as she walked by. There were about 30 of them, but none had the sound turned on. She just walked by, clicked it on, went to the next one, and so on. I went out to check if the bathrooms had been cleaned by the dishwasher, and when I came back through the dining room, they already had a table of about 10 older women, part of a Red Hat Club type group. Right next to them, on the TV above a booth, was a scene involving a woman and multiple men. I had to keep my cool, not attract attention and do the old scratch my head or reach up and turn it off trick. Somehow those women were too engrossed in their conversation to notice me or what was on the screen. It turned out at least 10 other TVs had the same movie playing. The front of house manager was mortified when I told her. She was frantically trying to find anything safe to tune to while I went around rapidly turning off TVs. That was a memorable morning. Story 26. It definitely provided quite a memorable experience for a faculty member at my high school. I was spending time with a girl, and since our opportunities were limited to school hours, we'd found a few discreet spots around campus. One of these was the room leading to the elevator that was exclusively for students with disabilities. One day, as we were in an intimate moment, the door opened and a faculty member responsible for those students caught us. She immediately started yelling and ran off to get help, likely from the shock. She left a girl in a wheelchair just sitting there. She smiled and waved to her as we left, and she seemed content to have the moment to herself. We never got in trouble or were called out for it, which is surprising considering all the cameras on campus. In retrospect, that faculty member's reaction was quite extreme and out of proportion. I'm sure whoever she found just dismissed it. Story 27. Not something I saw, but something I heard about. This story was shared with us by the security team in charge of handling the CCTVs at our university. When the CCTVs were first installed on campus, students and professors didn't really get the memo, even though it had been announced several times. On the first day they were online, there was a significant amount of intimate activity happening across campus. Students, professors, literally everyone in every corner of the university. It was quite widespread. They had a pretty small campus, but they still didn't have enough security to stop everyone. This continued for months until they made another announcement stating, "We have CCTVs now. The security team will see you and will catch you in the act, so don't even think about it." The security guards were mostly disheartened, seeing many students, including young women, engaging in inappropriate behavior with professors, allegedly for better grades. They described situations where attractive students were being intimate with professors, sometimes even during test papers. This happened a few years ago, around the mid to late 2000s, but even during my time in the mid-2010s, they were still catching someone at least once or twice a day. It usually just ended with a knock on the door and a quick departure. Didn't really apprehend these individuals unless they were repeat offenders because they didn't want to publicly acknowledge that such activity was rampant on campus, as that would tarnish its reputation. I'm not surprised, as I know many people who engaged in intimate acts on campus daily and didn't get caught. However, the guard at least confirmed my theory that probably 10% of a class of 40 to 50 students engaged in some form of intimate activity on campus. So, in a school with 10,000 students, you would have more or less 1,000 of them engaging in some form of intimate behavior daily. Might not be the same people each time, but roughly 1,000 students would be involved in such activities. Story 28. I decided to go to a party back in high school. Believe me, I definitely had some drinks, but parties were never really my thing. However, my friend convinced me to go, and I thought, why not? The party was fine. I wasn't completely intoxicated, so I was still coherent and able to make reasonable decisions, rather than blacking out and ending up in embarrassing social media posts. Everything changed though when my friend led me out to the deck. The party was hosted at a rich guy's house, so they had a deck, a pool, and other fancy things. There was a scene with multiple couples being intimate, scattered across the deck. Safe to say I had poor self-control back then, and my friend and I shared an intimate moment with a girl. I'm not proud of it, but I was young and partly intoxicated. Apparently in my high school, at every party, there was some section where multiple people were getting frisky. It's kind of odd to think about it now. Story 29. Ironically, I didn't see this happen. During our intimate ed class in high school, we were practicing putting a rubber on in the dark. Our PE teacher brought a plastic banana and removed its layers to reveal the form underneath. I was randomly selected to put that banana in my zipper and be blindfolded as a simulation to put it on in the dark. Halfway through struggling to get the rubber on, the principal called me over the PA system to visit his office ASAP to pick up a parcel. I excitedly took my blindfold off, sprinted past 3 classrooms, and didn't realize that I still had my plastic banana sticking out of my pants, until one of the girls next door yelled, "Your fly is open!" Story 30. During exam season at school, I was studying in one of those large lounge areas with many tables grouped together. Around 10 or 11 p.m., a couple discreetly left the area. This lounge had windows all along one side that looked out into a courtyard. The courtyard was empty at the time of the night, and on either side of it were several small classrooms. A light came on in one of the classrooms, but nobody really noticed at first. The couple then entered and began an intimate encounter. They didn't realize that while the blinds prevented them from seeing out, the room was completely visible from the outside with the lights on. Word quickly spread after someone noticed, and soon, about 50 people were watching and laughing. Eventually, they finished and came back into the lounge to a huge round of applause. I knew the girl pretty well. She was mortified, especially as people teased her about it for years. I would move schools, bro. Story 31. I went to an elementary school in a district that didn't have its own high school. The solution was that high schoolers were bused 2 towns over to attend their school. Elementary and high school students would get picked up by the same bus, elementary kids would get off at our school, and high schoolers would continue on to theirs. You know it. I got on at my stop, walked to the back to sit with a friend who I'll call the lookout. There, one guy, my friend's older brother, was having intimacy with his girlfriend, and another guy was being intimate with a girl while sitting on the bench seat. I distinctly remember just stopping in my tracks until my friend's brother asked if I was enjoying the show and told me to move along. It was a couple of years before I fully understood what I had seen. Story 32. This happened back when I was in senior high and it was during PE time. Our room was on the 4th floor of the building. There were about 4 rooms on the 4th floor and a small storage area at the end of the hall. No one else was there at the time, considering that some classes went to their designated stations or subject rooms, and we currently had PE, so everyone was at the gym. When I went back to my room to fetch my water bottle, I saw that one of my female classmates' bags was still in the room. I grabbed it, thinking she might have forgotten it in a rush and that I'd just text her about it when I got downstairs. Getting out of the room, I heard rattling sounds in the storage closet, but I didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was just rats. I walked away until I faintly heard sounds and hushing noises. So I pretended to walk away and slowly tiptoed back to the storage room, trying to be as quiet as possible and keep my shadow from being seen by staying close to the walls. I'm quite nosy, I know. There was a small hole near the door, and when I took a peek, I saw my classmate, the owner of the bag I had with me, and my business ethics teacher, who mind you was married and his wife was our organization and management teacher, engaged in an intimate act near the door. Ending, I created an anonymous account on Facebook and sent a recording to his wife. He was fired and likely faced legal action. The girl was humiliated in front of the class by her mom. It's worth noting that she consented and her behavior was also quite forward. Story 33. Not very NSFW, but something that amused me. As a university professor, I once came across a group of students sitting on the grass and sharing a grass whilst I was walking through a quiet part of campus. The boy who was holding it looked up, saw me approaching, yelped, and dropped the grass. He leapt to his feet and started hurting himself whilst his friend sat frozen, staring at the ground. I pretended not to notice. I figured it suffered enough. Story 34. I was driving east on I-55 towards Chicago, and out of nowhere, I came upon a semi-truck in the left westbound lane that was completely engulfed in flames. It must have just happened, as no first responders were there yet and traffic was heavy, so I couldn't move over. I'd never seen steel melting before. Fire was so intense, I was shocked I could feel its heat inside my car as it drove past. When I got home from work later that evening, it turned out the driver passed away. It's crazy how my brain suppressed that, making me believe the driver must have gone out, allowing me to work a full day. Story 35. My professor heard we were going to a bar one night and asked if they could come along. Then they asked if they could ride with me. After that, they asked if I could stop at an ATM for cash. Once we got to the bar, she danced with my friends and flirted with a couple of them. She was over 50, and we were in our early 20s. I ended up getting an A in her class. Once at a college party, a guy was dared to do his party trick. He engaged in a very personal act. At least that's what I was told. I looked away once it became clear what he was doing, as that was proof enough for me. When I was 16, I got my first job as a lifeguard, making $6.25 an hour. A woman over 30 drowned in 3 feet of water. The lifeguard next to me was the first responder, so I assisted. I asked her if the woman was breathing, and right after I asked, she let out a breath. They moved her out of the pool, and firefighters arrived and took over. They told us that breath was essentially her rattle at the worst possible time. Our management told us not to talk to anyone about it, even our families. Then we were told we could call an 800 number for a talk session, or we could meet up with a fireman at the station to process the trauma with him. My coworker, also 16, was there for the incident, so she went with me about every other week to play poker and eat ice cream at the fire station. It was so much fun. We did it all summer until my friend told me one of the firemen was asking her inappropriate questions. I got uncomfortable and decided it wasn't helpful anymore, so we stopped going. I think that's probably about it. Story 36. In high school, we had an art gallery event, and a freshman girl decided to display artwork consisting of hand-drawn self-portraits. The school attempted to close it down, but her father, who was a lawyer, threatened legal action, citing freedom of expression. The second incident was at university. I walked past a guy who was on his laptop in a common seating area. The sound was too loud, and I recognized the music from an adult animation. I looked at him, and he realized I recognized it and paused it. Story 37. Most NSFW things seen in school. One of the girls in the Majorette team had a seam tear in her uniform and showed her back to everyone for like a quarter of a second during a halftime show in front of 3,000 people. Most NSFW thing I saw in college. Online class. Had a classmate that seemed to have a real problem with authority. They were meant to critique each other's work, an essay, and then turn in both the essay and the critique to the professor. Her essay was a picture of a poop. Most NSFW thing I saw in life. A motorcyclist was speeding at like 2 a.m. and fell asleep. He crashed into the diesel tanks of a parked semi-truck, which then ignited. I woke up during the collision and rushed outside to find him screaming and rolling around. He didn't make it. Story 38. I finished my shift at 9 p.m. at a supermarket in the city center. I was waiting for the bus at the bus stop, which was across from several pubs. The door to one of the pubs suddenly opened and 2 women came out onto the street. One was shouting, "If she speaks to me like that again, I'll hurt her," while her friend tried to calm her down. The angrier one of the two then lifted her skirt, squatted down, and began to relieve herself in the street, still ranting about whoever had annoyed her. My fellow bus passengers were all looking on in horror. She then stood up, obviously without wiping, and went straight back into the pub. Story 39. This isn't the typical NSFW incident, but it certainly fits. The buddies and I returned to the residence hall from a party, and when the elevator doors opened, it smelled absolutely awful, like someone had unleashed a terrible odor. The stench was so strong I started gagging. The smell worsened as I went further down the hall. We started knocking on doors to figure out what was going on. We got to the last door and heard a guy let out a sound. I was clearly in bad shape. The door was locked, so we called the RAs, who then contacted campus police and medical personnel. When the RA keyed into the room and opened the door, he nearly passed out from the smell. It took everything he had to stay upright. The guy in the room was so intoxicated that he couldn't move, and had messed himself up in bed, which explained the awful stench. Medical personnel went in and had to pump him. Rumor has it his alcohol content was in the high 0.3s. The mattress was a biohazard and had to be discarded. The smell lingered for days. Story 40. I used to work as an IT technician at a large company. I remotely accessed our chief medical officer's company computer to set up a new program and process we were using, perhaps for a VPN, and he asked me to bookmark the site for him. I bookmarked it and then went to show him where the bookmark was. That's when I saw approximately 800 bookmarked adult websites. The work bookmark was added to the bottom of this long list, so I had to scroll down quite a distance, pretending not to see anything just to show him where I was. It was the most awkward minute of my life. Yes, he eventually got fired for it. This was only my second month of my first job out of college. Story 41. When I was in 6th grade, Bill M., the son of a local police officer, brought some magazines. You know what kind it is, to school, and we took pages. I went a step further and cut out the images of the woman, pasting them into a school notebook. That led to an embarrassing ride home, and a call went out to my family, and my stepfather had to pick me up. It was a group incident, originating elsewhere when some 6th grade rat reported everyone, telling the principal I kept pictures in a notebook, which I, of course, denied. My stepfather was a cool guy, but this was an awkward conversation for a 6th grader. Decided to bring up the topic. I mentioned how it's normal to start having certain dreams and asked if any of the women in the magazines were unattractive. Keeping in mind he probably had magazines from the 70s or 80s, chuckled. Oh, and he asked if I'd taken them from his personal collection. I reassured him they were all from Bill M.'s dad. Even more memorable, my high school girlfriend, whose father was the longtime maintenance worker at the school, shared an intimate moment in the stairwell during classes. It wasn't prolonged by any means, and I still have no idea why we weren't in class and were together. She was a year below me. Story 42. The campus security office asked for volunteers to be part of the fire safety team. We received high visibility vests and red hats, and our main role was to knock on doors and ensure everyone evacuated safely during derails or incidents. Part of the training involved learning how to use a fire extinguisher. To practice, we needed a fire. So they had a steel box about 10 square feet, 1 square meter, and 8 inches, 20 centimeters deep. They put a gallon, 4 liters of gas in it and set it on fire, then instructed us on how to approach it and use a CO2 extinguisher. What they didn't tell us was that when you discharge a CO2 extinguisher, it pushes a lot of air toward the fire first. I was first to try, feeling confident and ready. However, I was apparently too far away when it pulled the trigger. This sent a gust of air directly into the flames, creating a fireball that lit up the quad like high noon and left my face feeling sunburned. Then 2 seconds later, the fire was out, and we were in darkness. Nobody else wanted to try after that. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.